So back in August, we had a marriage workshop here that Kristen and Jack had organized, and Chloe and I were a part of it for a little bit, for a part of the teaching, but something that Jack and Kristen encouraged and challenged us couples in the room to do was to plan out the next few dates over the next few months and stick to them. So we're going to plan a day, and then one spouse is going to plan one day, and then the other spouse is going to plan the next day, and we're going to rotate in and out, or however we want to do that. But they encouraged us to get creative, to do things that we normally don't do on dates. So for Chloe's birthday, I planned a progressive dinner date. Now, most of you probably know what that is, but in case you don't, or in case someone online doesn't know, we went to different places. We love eating out. We love eating fast food. So we went to different fast food restaurants. And so the first one, we got our non-alcoholic drinks. And then we went to get appetizers at a different place. And then we got our main course at a different place. And then the last place, we got dessert. And we did that, but that works for us because, one, like I just said, we love going to fast food restaurants, but we also love spending time in the car together. And so that was everything. That was perfect for us because we were in the car the entire time, talking, having a conversation and everything. But our last stop was for dessert at Culver's. Now, Chloe and I, we love Culver's, but we also have a love-hate relationship with their service. So anytime that we order milkshakes, right, we love their milkshakes, and most of the time, if we're going there, it's just for the milkshake. But if we get milkshakes, we'll drive up to the drive-thru, or we'll go up to the counter, we'll order. Within 5 minutes, we've got our milkshakes. If we order anything else, they will forget about us. 100% of the time, they forget about us. We have witnesses. Jessica went with us one time to Culver's. She got her food. We didn't get ours. The waitress or whoever it was brought it to the table, saw that we had the same number, brought her food, and then left. And we're like, oh, they're going back to go and get ours. 20 minutes later, we're like, where's our food? We forgot that we were supposed to be eating, that we even ordered anything. So we go up every single time. I go up to the counter if we're in drive-thru, and we order, if we order milkshakes and fries, we will not get any of it. If we order just milkshakes, guaranteed, we get up to the window, we pay, they hand us the milkshakes. Any other time, right? This time, on our progressive dinner date, we're like, we always get milkshakes here. Why don't we just get their frozen custard? We like their ice cream. We drive up, we order, we go up to the window. They say, it's not quite ready yet. I'm like, it's ice cream. Come on, man. It is ice cream. I see the ice cream maker. I see them making ice cream. Just give it to... Well, we need you to pull around to the furthest spot, which was one spot away. Granted, they're very busy. I'm a very patient person, but I'm not that patient. So we get up, we drive up, and one by one, the cars in front of us that are in the parking spots, this man walks, he goes, gives them their food, they drive off, everyone moves up one, right? That's what you're supposed to do. So we're going one by one. These cars in front of us are all getting it. And then we get to the front spot. And then one by one, every car behind us starts getting all of their stuff. I'm looking at Chloe. I'm like, they forgot us again. Like we're trying so hard for them to actually serve us. So then we're sitting there. I don't know how long. I'm patient to probably a fault at times, because about 20 minutes later, I'm like, I can't take it anymore. Like, I enjoy talking to you, and I enjoy being in the car, but I don't like being parked here. I don't like seeing everyone else. Like, there's not even a line anymore. We're just by ourselves in this top parking spot, and no one's coming out to serve us. And I know they see me because the guy keeps going to the car next to us. So he has to see the number and everything. So I walk inside, and I show him my number. I'm like, hey, we've been sitting down in the parking lot for like 2 hours now is what it feels like. And so here's the number. And then she looks at the number. She looks on the screen. She goes, what'd you even order? So then I reordered. And then she goes, and I kid you not, she went over to the screen that had all their drive-thru orders. And she goes, as she's looking through the hundreds of orders that were after us and before us, And then she goes, oh, there it is right there. After like 10 pages of her flipping through the long list of people. So then she goes, she makes it, she hands it to us, and then we enjoyed our ice cream. So we have this love-hate relationship with Culver's. We love their food, we love their ice cream, but they don't like us. They don't want us to come back, and we keep coming back anyways. But here's what I think, and this has a purpose, and I'm not just telling you this because it's a very heavy topic today. When we are in our Christian walk, I honestly think that sometimes we treat God like we treat Culver's. We go in line, and we have something that's really deep, something really broken, something really strongly that we care about, and we bring it to God, and then it's like we wait our turn in line. And as we're waiting our turn in line, and we're going through the process, we're going through the motions, we're going to church, we're reading our Bibles, we're praying, we're doing everything that we're supposed to. And then we start seeing people who are coming into the faith fresh and new, and they ask God one time, and then they get it. And we're like, wait, I was here first. Why are they getting it? Not that I'm not happy for them, right? Because we're all supposed to be happy for the people who get their blessings before us. But I'm happy for them, God, but I'm waiting in line. I'm supposed to have already had this now. What? God, did you forget about me? Is mine just not that important? To where all of these people are getting exactly what they've been asking for and what they've been asking me to pray for. And I've been praying for them because I know that if I pray for them, I just feel that you're going to return that favor for me, and that people are praying for me, and I'm still not healed from what's breaking me. So God, why is it that everyone else seems to find this healing and I can't? Why is it that I'm stuck in the top spot in line, and it seems like you're walking right past me just to serve someone else, just to heal someone else, just to do what someone else asks? And oftentimes we think of God that way. Now, I want to correct your understanding, because if you're thinking of God like a drive-through, you're thinking about God wrong. God is not a drive-through. He is not a genie in a bottle. He is not there to serve in order. He serves when you need it. He answers when you need it. And I have this story today that comes from the book of Mark. It comes in all three of the synoptic gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And each time you see this interruption in this person's healing. And so before we actually get to the scriptures today, because I know it was really funny at first, but now we're going to get serious. So I want you to take a deep breath in. That includes you too, Truett. Take a deep breath in. I will only ever do that to my kid, by the way. That will never happen to any of your kids. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out. Say, I'm broken, and I need a Savior. Another deep breath in and out. I'm broken, and I need a Savior. And what's his name? His name is Jesus. Mark chapter 5 is where we find this story. Starting verse 21, I'll go ahead and read it for you. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed in around him, and a woman who was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had. Instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, Her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out of him, and he turned and looked at the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," the disciples answered. "Yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" Like everyone's bumping into you. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the entire truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Do not be afraid, just believe." And he would not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. They went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around, for she was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So a little bit of context. Jesus, before we get to this passage, Jesus has spent an entire day of teaching parables to the crowds, and he tells his disciples to go on to the boat and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. While they're on the boat, or while they're in the sea, Jesus is traveling with them. This furious storm erupts on the lake. That's probably a familiar story for some of you. And Jesus is in the boat, and he's asleep on a cushion, because Jesus loved to take naps too. So there's this furious storm that's going about. Jesus is sound asleep. The disciples are panicking. Some of them professional fishermen seeing this storm, and they're panicking, and they're like, "Jesus, what are you doing? Like, how could you be sleeping through all of this? It's loud. If anything, it's loud, but it's also scary. Like, what is happening?" And Jesus calms the sea. He calms the storm. And the disciples were amazed at this. Well, then they get to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus steps out of the boat, and they encounter this demon-possessed man. And this demon-possessed man had been possessed by a legion of demons. When Jesus asked what the name of the demon was, they said legion, because there's many of them inside of him. And this is the story where Jesus casts all the demons out into the pigs. And the pigs, they run into the Sea of Galilee, they drown, they die. There's about 2,000 of them. Well, then because of this, people started to plead with Jesus to leave their region. They said, "Get out of here," which is not that they weren't happy that the demon-possessed man was healed. They were frustrated and angry with Jesus because he just killed, in their minds, he just killed 2,000 of their livestock. So 2,000 of whoever's pigs those were, he just lost all of that revenue. He lost all of that wealth just by Jesus simply casting out a demon into the pigs, because the demons had to go somewhere. And so they plead with Jesus. They say, "Get out of here. We don't want you ever here." So him and the disciples, they go back across the Sea of Galilee, and that's where we get to this passage. They're on the boat. They come back. They land on shore. And Jesus is immediately surrounded by this large crowd that wants to be healed. They want to hear his teaching. They want to hear the teaching again. They want to see him for the first time. Jesus is like a celebrity to them. They're so enamored by Jesus' presence, and they all crowd around him. And the synagogue leader pushes his way through, falls at the feet of Jesus, and pleads with Jesus to come to his home because his daughter is dying. Now, this is odd for a synagogue leader, because if you know Scripture enough, you know that in Jesus' time, the religious people of the day didn't exactly like Jesus. They didn't like how he was claiming to be God. They didn't like how he was claiming to be the Messiah. And so they didn't get along with Jesus. So this synagogue leader who's coming, and he's like, man, I'm on my last string. Maybe this Jesus guy who's done miracles for other people, maybe it's not even biblical for me to do this, but I'm going to go and I'm going to plead with him to actually come to my house. Because I believe that if he's healed other people, he can also heal my little daughter. Now, synagogue leaders, they were like deacons or elders in a church. So they weren't the Pharisees, they weren't the ones that were teaching the law, but they were there to take care of the church building, the temple building. They were there to take care of the synagogue. They were there to even go and talk to people and build relationships with people, just like deacons and elders and even pastors do today. But this synagogue leader, he comes, he has some level of status in society, which is probably why he was able to make his way through the crowd swiftly. And he pleads with him, my daughter's dying, can you please come and heal him? And Jesus decides to go with him. And this large crowd, they all follow. They're like, oh man, Jesus is about to do another miracle. We're about to experience this. Some of them maybe even didn't hear what he had said in all the parables. And they, as the crowds dispersed when Jesus left the first time, they went and told their family. Now their family's back. So it's probably even a larger crowd than when when he was teaching the parables. And everyone's wanting to see what's happening. And you can imagine, because you've all been in crowds before, people are bumping into you. They're all around. They're trying to get in close. They're trying to go wherever Jesus is going. And so they're probably bumping into Jesus too. And they're bumping into the disciples. They're all trying to see this miraculous work that Jesus is about to accomplish. And as he's talking to this crowd, probably talking to people, probably teaching some people that are coming in, and they're trying to ask him questions, and he's answering some of those questions. There's this woman who sees Jesus walk by. And as Jesus is walking by, she's like, I know him. I've heard about him. I've heard that he heals. I believe that he can heal me too. But I'm going to have to be careful about this, because since I've been having this disease that involves bleeding, I'm considered ceremonially unclean. So no one's going to be able to touch me. I can't touch anyone else, but I have to find a way to touch him so that I will be healed. And so she starts making her way through the crowd, and I imagine that the crowd probably knows her. They're seeing her come up, and they're probably getting out of the way because they don't want to be unclean. And they know that if they touch her, they will be unclean. They'll have to go through the whole ritual cleansing process, and they don't have time for that. So they're probably... The waters are parting for this woman to come, and she's maybe even crawling on the ground so that she won't be as seen, as noticed by Jesus. And she comes, and as some translations will say, she touches the hem of his garment, just the very edge of his garment. If he didn't wear pants, but if he wore pants, it'd be like right here, just right at the very edge. And she didn't even touch him, just his clothes. And immediately, she felt that she was healed. She could feel it, that all of her illness, everything that had gotten worse in her life was completely done. She was completely healed. And you got to think, you're in a crowd full of people. People are bumping into you. You're not going to feel someone barely touch your clothes. But what Jesus felt was power leave him. It wasn't God putting power through him and out of him, and he didn't feel it come through. He felt it leave his body. And so as they're walking, he stops. He turns towards the crowd, and he's like, who touched me? Now the disciples are like what any of us would have been like. What are you talking about? He touched you. She touched you. They bumped into you like 5 minutes ago. Like all of these people, I bumped into you. Like maybe it was just me. Like what? And he was like, no. Someone touched me. Someone touched my clothes. Who touched my clothes? Now everyone else is probably like, it wasn't me, Jesus. Jesus sounds a little angry. And so everyone's like, and then Jesus starts going through the crowd. He's like, where is she at? If you look at the original language, when it says who, it actually has a feminine, whatever the word is. It's written out feminine in the original language, meaning that who was a woman. So he knew that it was a woman. And so he's looking around, and then eventually she comes out from the crowd, and she's like, God, I don't want you to be mad at me, But it was me. I've been dealing with this illness for all these years. I've been a social outcast because I've been unclean and I can't get clean because it just continues. I continue to bleed. So I just thought that if I touched your garment, if I just touched the edge of your clothes, then I would be healed. And I am healed, and I'm sorry. And then Jesus looks at her and says, daughter, you've been healed. Your faith has healed you. Now go in peace and go from here because your faith has healed you. And he calls her daughter. Now that will become important in just a minute, but he stops walking. He turns to the crowd, and you got to be thinking, what's Jairus, or however you pronounce his name? What's the synagogue leader? What's he have to think about this? Because he's very in an urgent situation, right? His daughter is dying. Whenever he left his home to go and find Jesus, his servants, his other religious leaders probably told him it was a bad idea. And he was like, I got nothing left. I see my daughter's condition. She is not going to survive much longer. In fact, she's probably going to die today. So I need to do something drastic to make sure that she's healed. So he, the synagogue leader, runs to Jesus, pleads with Jesus, leaves his entire reputation on the line talking to this man that many considered a false prophet in religious circles. And he's like, I know that you can heal her. There's some urgency behind his words. And as they're going along, Jesus stops. For someone who's been sick for 12 years, he's like, my daughter's 12 years old. Her life has just begun. This woman, she spent the last 12 years of her adult life being an outcast. She's used to it. My daughter's 12. And what that means in our and Jewish culture was 12 was the year that you got married. And you started your adult life because things were much different back then. And so he's like, why are you dealing with her? She's probably going to die, and she's going to die, and it's going to be fine because she's used to it. My daughter, on the other hand, she's about to start her real life as an adult. Like, why are we stopping? I ask you first. Do you not feel the urgency? Do you not care enough to actually come and she'll probably still be here. You can come and heal my daughter and come back and heal her too. In fact, she's already healed. You don't even have to address her. She touched your clothes. She's healed. Like, let's move on, Jesus. You can sense the urgency that the synagogue leader is having as Jesus is having a conversation with this woman. He hears and sees his servants come up. They come up and they're like, it's too late. She's died. We told you it was a bad idea. And you got to think about what's happening in this synagogue leader's mind. I missed the last moments of my daughter's life, trying to follow someone that I was even skeptical about myself. I lost that, and I'll never get that back. And so he's afraid. He's regretting some things. He's suffering. And Jesus hears the conversation and says, don't be afraid. Just believe. Just have a little faith. So they continue on. I can imagine he's thinking to himself all of these things, like thinking as himself. He's like, man, I'm so stupid. Why would I trust that this guy who's never met me before, who probably despises me because of my position in the church, position in the temple, and in the synagogue, like, he probably did that on purpose because he knows that I probably despise him, and I think he's a false teacher too, and he probably knows. And he probably just wanted to see me suffer. Man, I didn't get to spend that last moment with my daughter. I didn't get to tell her that I loved her before she passed away. All she had was my servants and her mom. She didn't even have her own dad there. And as they're walking along, Jesus comes up to the house, and there's all these people crying and wailing, and they're doing this all very loudly. Now, in Jewish culture, there's these things that happened at every single funeral that they had. They're called professional mourners. And what these professional mourners would do is that they would be paid by the family to come and help comfort the family, which means that they would take on the emotions. They would cry with them. They would weep with them. They would, give them hugs, and they would comfort them. And that's what they were paid to do, is their job. Now, today, we don't really have anything like this, but it's not necessarily a funeral director or funeral worker people that they're even describing. It's something that we really don't even have that I know of. But literally, you're paying these people who are basically professional actors to act like they care about your family to help you get through the grieving process. And they do it for the day of the funeral and the time of death. And then once they're done, they get their paycheck, they leave. So there's likely, because of his status, that some of those people were there among family and friends who actually cared about the little girl. But all these people, they're crying, they're wailing out loud, and Jesus says, "What's all the commotion about? She's just asleep. She's just asleep. Like she's going to wake up. I'm going to wake her up." And then the professional mourners in the room start laughing at him and mocking him. That's how you know they weren't genuine. Because as they're sitting there watching this family grieve, they're also grieving, but then Jesus makes a statement, she's just asleep, and then they start laughing at him. Like someone just cracked the biggest joke in the room. And so as they walk in, he dismisses the entire crowd of mourners. So now the crowd that was following him, that stopped with the woman that was in the street that had been bleeding for 12 years, he stops them all. He doesn't allow any of them to go except for Peter, James, and John. And so Peter, James, and John, the Father, and Jesus, they walk up. They see all of this, and he dismisses everyone. He's like, "Professional mourners, you've been paid. You can go along your way now." It's like, "Family and friends, you can go ahead and go away for a minute. You'll see her walking here in a moment." And the three disciples, Jesus and the mother and the father, they walk into the room with the little girl. And Jesus walks up to her, takes her by the hand, and says, "Get up. Get up. Start walking around. You're just asleep." And then she gets up and she starts walking around. And so Jesus heals her. They're astonished. He says, "Don't tell anyone, because I don't want people coming to me for the wrong reasons. I don't want them to come to me just to be healed. I want to know them. I want to know them deeply." And so Mark makes this note that's really hard for me to ignore, but I still don't have my head completely wrapped around it, is that this girl was 12 years old and the other one had been dealing with it for 12 years. There is some type of connection between the two. The entire life of this little girl was also the past 12 years that this woman has been dealing with her disease. And Jesus healed them both in the same day, in the same moment. Both were near death. And the woman, after 12 years of suffering, was healed. And the little girl who was 12 years old that had just recently gotten ill was also raised from the dead. Here's the difference, and this is where I really want to push us as a church, okay? This girl, the little girl, the 12-year-old girl, who did she have? She had her father who was willing to stand in the gap of faith for his daughter. We never hear about the faith of the daughter. We hear about the faith of the father. And so the father was there to stand in the gap, to pray on her behalf, to come to Jesus on her behalf, and he was willing to do whatever it took, whatever Jesus desired, so that his daughter would be healed. The woman, on the other hand, had no one to stand in the gap for her. She had to come to Jesus by herself in her own strength and her own power so that she could be healed. Both of them are called daughter. The little girl is called daughter by her father. And the woman who had been bleeding, who had been an outcast, who likely didn't have any family or friends around because of her unclean state, who's been living in isolation by herself, suffering alone for all of these years, for 12 years straight. And Jesus comes up to her and says, daughter, meaning I know you don't got a father, you don't have family, but you're in my family. And I will take care of you, and I will stand in the gap between you and my heavenly Father so that your request will be made and will be answered and you will be healed. Now, what this means for you is that when you're not hurting, because some of you in here, you're not hurting, life's going great, and that's great. We celebrate with you. But when you're not in pain and when you're alive and well, I urge you, reach out to the broken and stand in the gap for them. Because you don't know if they actually have someone praying on their behalf. Because your faith is the faith that God will answer. When you stand in that gap for them, when you stand before the Lord and you say, I don't know if this person knows you. I don't know if they've been reaching out to you. I don't know if they even know who you are or what you've done in my life, but I know that you're a God who heals. And because you're a God who heals, I know that you'll also heal this person. And they may not have any faith in you, but I have faith that you will. And that this miraculous sign to heal them from whatever it is, mental illness, from physical disease, from brokenness, whatever it is, I know that you'll heal him or heal him, you'll heal her. And what you'll do is that you'll use me to let him know that God's the one that heals. And so you stand in the gap, and because you have the little faith of a mustard seed that moves mountains, that overcomes kingdoms, that overcomes all darkness, your faith can lead to healing for people. And I'm pleading with you, pray in faith on their behalf, the ones who are broken. You may not be broken right now, but they are. So stand in the gap. And for those of you who are alone, and you're broken, you're weary, you're afraid, you're suffering, if you're that in the room, listen to me. Lean in for a moment. I'm standing in the gap for you. Yesterday, I came up to the church, and I was up here most of the day trying to make sure the words that I was saying, because I'm trying to be so sensitive about the brokenness that's in our church right now. And so I was going through what I already prepared. I changed a few things. I finished out my message, and I was working on it. And about 3:30 that afternoon, yesterday afternoon, I was like, I need to take some time, and I need to pray. I need to stand in the gap. God's been challenging me to challenge the church, so I got to do it too. So I prayed for about 30 minutes. For the broken people, for the message, for how this would be received today. And my plan was to come home at 4, and I was about to leave my office, and then I didn't. I texted Chloe so she didn't think I died or got in a wreck or something, and I was like, hey, I'm going to be at the church for another 30 minutes or so. And I came and I walked over every single seat. And I prayed over every single seat. And I was like, Lord, everyone who walks into this room, let my faith heal them. If no one else is praying for them, if no one else cares about them, Lord, let it be known that I care about them. And as I walked through, I felt your pain. And in fact, I'll keep this to myself, but I felt the pain more in some chairs than others, and some of you are sitting in them. And so as I'm walking through and I'm feeling the weight, you probably saw me up here before the morning service, and as we were singing, I was praying up here, and I just asked God, I said, God, if I can take off their burden just a little bit, and you put that burden on me, I am happy to do that, to stand in the gap, to feel what they feel, so that they can have a moment of relief. And so if yesterday you had a moment of relief, today if you have a moment of relief, just know I'm carrying that for you because I'm willing to stand in the gap. But as a church, are we all willing to do that too? Because Jesus, he says, I've been broken, I've been beaten, I've been bruised. I've had a crown placed on my head to mock who I am. I'm of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He says, I carried a cross that you deserved. I was nailed to it, and I died a death that was rightfully yours. I was laid in a tomb, and I sat there and was sealed in isolation from the rest of the world for 3 days straight, and I stand here today as living proof that I've overcome everything that you could ever encounter in your entire life. And so if I can overcome it and you follow me, I can break whatever is keeping you broken in your life. I have already overcome it, and so I can overcome it for you too. Jesus is more enough to break your chains of brokenness. He's more than enough to restore you. He's more than enough to heal you. He's more than enough to make you into a new creation to where you will suffer no more, but you will always trust when you do. Doesn't matter if you've been suffering for 12 years or 12 seconds. Jesus is enough for you to be healed. And if you have faith and you believe with all of your heart that Jesus can and he will heal you and your families, he will. He will do it. I have trust and faith that he will. It may not be healing in the way that we desire or the way that we imagine, but he will heal because he answers those who call on his name and love him. He answers those who seek him. And so, church, as I wrap up, I'd invite you to come up to the altar as we sing this last song, or at least to the front row, or front rows. And if you're broken, I encourage you to come before God, and I'll be here to stand in the gap and pray with you. But for those of you who aren't broken, life is going great right now. Just know there are people in this church right now who are hurting, and they need your prayers. And so would you be willing to come up to the altar on their behalf, to stand in the gap for them, pray on their behalf, and show them, I'm willing to pray for them. To show her, I'm willing to pray for you. To show him, I'm willing to pray for you. I'm willing to stand wherever I need to. I'm willing to be uncomfortable for a few moments, kneeling on the ground, sitting in a chair, in a different chair than what I always sit in every single Sunday. If you would be willing to pray, I just ask one thing. If you're going to come up to this sacred place and pray at the altar, it better be genuine. My entire early life was spent praying on the altar, not for myself, for other people. In fact, Ashley and Ashley at least, maybe Dustin too, I don't remember. But when we were at Mount Gilead, 5-year-old little Logan, he came up to the altar one time for himself, and that was to receive the salvation of Jesus Christ. But every single other time that I went up there to pray for others. And if no one was at the altar, I waited on the front row for someone to come up. This is what the altar is for. It's for you to come to God, not just for yourself, but for other people. Just because you come up here, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily broken or that other people are going to think that. It's simply because I'm up here and I'm praying for people most Sundays, mostly throughout the week. I'm up here and I'm praying, and I'm not praying for myself. I'm praying for you. So I just ask you to also do that. I'm not trying to say that I'm great at it because I'm not. But I encourage you, if it's genuine. I don't want a show. I don't want a bunch of people coming up here because they feel bad or they think that I'm going to think less of them. If it's going to be genuine, then come. If it's not, sit in your chair, pray from your seat. If you're physically not able, I understand that. What I'm challenging you to do is to actually support the brokenhearted in the room and find the courage to come up here